Welcome back to Hardball. Tom Ridge served 5 terms as a Republican in the House of Representatives, was a two-term governor of the great state of Pennsylvania, and the first Homeland Secretary in the nation's history. He knows Washington, he knows politics, and he knows a party in trouble when he sees one. And right now, that would appear to be the GOP. Hey, Governor, it's great to have you back on Hardball.
Michael, nice to join you again. Thanks for the invite.
In those 5 terms in the House, did you ever see dysfunction like we're witnessing today?
Never. You know, I've tried to figure out over the period of time, going back to the 80s when I was privileged to serve, you had Ronald Reagan, the president, you had Tip O'Neill, the liberal, Bob Michael, the conservative, you had Senators Dole and Mitchell in the Senate, and there was so much respect, so much facility. There was hardball politics, but they were able to get things done. And I'm trying to figure out whether it's a World War II generation that provided the leadership, and we've just gone away from it. But it's kind of tragic when you've got one party, particularly President Obama, had a House and had a Senate for 2 years, and they operated for 2 years on a continuing resolution, and the deficit kept going higher and higher. So it's rather remarkable what's going on out there.
It looks like Speaker Boehner has lost control of his caucus. Is that how it strikes you?
Well, I'm not quite sure yet. I think Speaker Boehner's got a lot of the challenges associated with being in the majority there, not the least of which is folks in the Tea Party, and trying to get them to come to a consensus. And I'd like to think that he keeps plodding along, doing the best he can. And everybody in that party needs to understand that the American public, folks outside the Beltway, frankly, aren't happy with either party right now, are not happy with the president. You're sent to Washington to solve problems. Look, when the super committee was meeting to solve the deficit, to try to reduce the deficit by $1 trillion, you had a president hopscotch running around the world when he should have been in Washington dealing with the super committee, using the bully pulpit. And you take a look at the Senator Reid, again, tried to give us a 2 or 3 month tax cut instead of solving the problem. The problem is deficit, debt, deficit, debt. They're elected to solve that problem, and frankly, the American public getting a little tired of both parties not resolving it.
Governor, it looks like pragmatism, at least to my eye, is in short supply on the GOP side of the aisle, and the 2012 race is a great illustration of what I'm talking about. There's such hostility toward President Obama from a core Republican constituency, but they don't appear to be looking for he or she who might best defeat Barack Obama in a general election, and perhaps all that angst and anger is going to get lost in primary season. You know to what I refer.
No, absolutely. But I got the answer for them. I start by being governor-centric, and I take a look at a governor that had a great track record as governor, led the states in job creation. Pew Foundation said it was the best managed state. He's the only governor that has foreign policy experience. He's the only candidate that the Wall Street Journal says his economic plan is the best for the country, both short and long term, and someone who understands that America's future is with dealing with China and India, and that individual is Governor Huntsman. He is a solid conservative. He's a non-judgmental conservative. He's got a foreign policy experience, unlike the rest of the field combined, and he's got a heck of a record as governor. If they're looking for somebody to win in November, and you and I know this is not a 50-state election, we're down to 8 or 10 states, Jon Huntsman is the answer.
Right, but they're looking for somebody who's going to kneecap the president in the process, and he, because of the civility, and I credit him for that, with which he's run his campaign, he doesn't stack up in that category.
Well, there may be some people within our party that are looking for somebody to use a blunt assault weapon on the president. But I must tell you, I think the public at large is looking for someone with a better idea, a proven track record, who can attract them not only with the power of his ideas, but the civility with which he criticizes and confronts the president. And that candidate is Jon Huntsman.
Take a look at some of this data. Here are numbers from the most recent CNN Opinion Research Corporation poll. A matchup against Mitt Romney. The president now leads by 7 percentage points among registered voters. Against Newt Gingrich, he leads by a remarkable 16 percentage points. It's important to point out that other polls show the hypothetical races to be much closer. But my observation is that, you've got that wave that has moved from Bachmann to Perry to Kaine, now settling briefly on Newt. But I would argue that none of those candidates can defeat Barack Obama in a general election. So the question is, are they going to ultimately go back to Romney or to your guy?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think we're going to see Jon Huntsman, who decided for many, many reasons not to contest Iowa, is spending a great deal of time in New Hampshire and in South Carolina. And one of the challenges, I think, when you kind of distill the arguments for candidates throughout, and we will respect them all, and I know I do, and I know Jon Huntsman does, at the end of the day, who is the consistent principled conservative. What Jon Huntsman tells you on Monday, he tells you the same thing on Friday. So you don't have to worry about changing a position there. But who can best articulate an entirely different vision, a 21st century vision based upon our engagement with the part of the world that we're kind of ignoring now in both a tough and in a sensible kind of way, someone with foreign policy experience. And I'm going to keep going back to that arbiter of finance and economic plans. The Wall Street Journal says if you really want somebody to do something effective with regard to the economy, then you ought to take a look at Jon Huntsman's economic plan. So at the end of the day, if you win, if you think about it being 8 or 10 states instead of 50, you got to be looking at Governor Huntsman. I'm
going to lose you in just a minute. Does he need to win New Hampshire or have a strong showing in New Hampshire?
No, I think a strong showing. Several people have said a second or third all of a sudden gets him in the limelight where he needs to belong. There's been a winnowing of all these other candidates, and at the end of the day, it could end up being Governor Romney, Speaker Gingrich, and Jon Huntsman after New Hampshire.
Governor Ridge, Merry Christmas. Thanks for your work on the Flight 93 Memorial, and thanks for being on Hardball.
I was going to thank you for your work on Flight 93 Memorial. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, sir.